Okay, so I'm quite happy to introduce my friend Ishak, who is well known to some of us here in OCMS. He's the third OCMS graduate to present in the series of lectures on Islam. You remember Mark Bobart, who presented the first lecture, graduated way back in 2003. We had Kyle Wisdom, who worked in Islamic studies, passed successfully several years ago. Now, Ishak, Dr. Ishak Ghatas. So you will remember the background to these lectures really owes to something we did together, including Matt, really, who should also be presenting a paper in OCMS. So we had a total of 6 or 7 papers presented on the theme of meekness and faith as polity. It's quite a simplistic, dualistic design. I told you last week that I'm personally very critical of this kind of simplistic propositions, but we deliberately wanted to keep it as simple as that so that we are able to invite critique from the authors who are contributing to the issue of the International Journal of Asian Christianity. It's a Brill journal published from E.J. Brill. And so the first 2 papers were historical in nature, one focusing on the Middle Eastern dynamics of Muslim-Christian relations, and the other focusing on the South Asian dimension of Muslim-Christian relations and the writings which were done and the debates that took place in the 19th century South Asia. And of course, we departed from that to focus on some historical and empirical cases. Today's focus really is empirical and ethnographic, to demonstrate that those simplistic categories really don't hold true to reality. So that the reality is far, far more nuanced and complex. And this is what Ishak is going to be presenting, is a demonstration of that. And thank you, Ishak, for agreeing to present it. Ishak is a mechanical engineer, actually, from Egypt, retrained as a theologian, became a pastor in Belgium, which is where he's settled for the last so many years. He's got 5 children, married to a Belgian. He was very active in church ministry. He has now 3 congregations that he manages, apart from all of the work he does with the Muslim immigrants in Europe. And his prison ministry is recognized by Belgian authorities. He's a chaplain as well. And there's much more. This that you should know. He is a religious expert at the International School of Protocol and Diplomacy. That's quite weighty. So I wouldn't like to waste. I can say a lot because Ishak and I go a long way back, and it was always a pleasure working closely with Ishak. And I was the happiest person on the face of this planet when Ishak successfully completed a fine thesis, which was defended well. Phil Lewis. It's very, very difficult to please Phil Lewis, I tell you. But he was delighted with the quality of the work that Ishak produced. He's a very prolific published author. He's published 11 papers since completing his PhDs, and that's an encouragement to all of you. And now he's in dialogue with the Catholic University of Leuven? Yeah, to publish his thesis as a monograph. So I asked him why he delayed it so much. Finished his PhD in 2019, and he said he's happy he chose to delay it. Because he's learned a lot more about things that are going on, which have now been incorporated in the text, which he has submitted already, has been accepted for publication. So we are going to see that in. Okay, so over to you, Ishak. It'll take about 40, 50 minutes for your presentation, and then we'll have some time for discussion.
Okay. The topic we will discuss today is Muslim minorities in Europe. A case of adaptation with life with neighbors in Brussels. My thesis, the methodology of my thesis was mixed interviews, discussion group, and texts as well. That's why I will speak a little bit about examining evidence from the ground related to how Muslims in Belgium seek creative solutions to the challenges of everyday life, particularly those related to dietary practices. They have challenges in family life, they have challenges on even acts of worship. They have challenges in different areas, but the focus of the day will be the dietary practices. I'm not talking only about food. You will be surprised to know that this also covers beauty materials and how to slaughter animals, even clothing. Some of the clothes made of animals, skin, or medicine, even water. I was surprised. I'm talking with a Muslim scholar in Belgium, and he said that even the recycled water in Europe is a problem for us, especially to do the washing before prayer.
Oh.
So they had a group going to find out if it is really clean to be used, especially recycled water. So it's a challenge for Muslims. So this, when we think it's only food and drinks, but it goes beyond food and the drinks. So a brochure to Shariʿah. Shariʿah is an Arabic word, Islamic law, or the law, if you like. Is very foundational to the life of Muslims, regardless to if they are a minority or a majority, if they are in a Muslim land or non-Muslim land, like living in the West. So Sharia is impossible. Muslims view Sharia as divine because it's based on the text of the Quran and the Hadith, the traditions of the Prophet. So it is divine in a sense of its origin, but its interpretation is made by the interpretations are made by humans. So that is why we have different schools of fiqh or jurisprudence. In the beginning of Islam, we had 4 of Sunni schools of salts of fiqh, and then 1 Shia salt. The difficulty Muslims have with these schools of fiqh that all of them were developed in a context where Muslims are majority. When they speak about minorities, they speak about people of the book, Christian and Jews are other minorities. But and this is difficult. Migration to non-Muslim majority societies has introduced a new reality, a new challenge to Muslims. When they immigrated or displaced, immigrated, that means being invited to work or to do some jobs, or refugees, we can call them displaced people. When they come and live, they don't have something ready at hand to deal with their challenges. Them as Muslims, at least in the beginning, they don't have something to how to live as a minority in non-Islamic or among a non-Islamic majority. On top of it, they also face the not the hatred, but the dislike of the West. They don't want them to stay. So this was the challenge. So they have to look for some creative ideas how to work out the two challenges of keeping the Islamic law, the Shariah, applying it, and at the same time avoid the challenges coming from secular society. You cannot live with two codes of life, two laws. So they have somehow to work out how to look for some creative ideas to help the Muslim diasporas in the West how to live and to be not just surviving, but to be even active members in the civic life. How to be active in the European West. So that is a migration to non-Muslim majority societies has produced new realities necessitating interpretive frameworks relevant to being in a minority status. This rethinking has led to the emergence of fiqh al-aqaliyya. As I said in the beginning, the schools of fiqh being developed or sought interpretation of the text of Sharia has been developed in the context where Muslims are majority. So they somehow they take things for granted. They don't say what to eat, for example, which kind of meat you buy in Egypt or Turkey, because the assumption is all meats are halal, because the conditions of Islamic countries is it. So they take things for granted. But coming to the West, different contexts, different ways of life, they have to be selective somehow, and to avoid or to live to not to break the Islamic laws, but also to live, and as I said, to go further, to be active members in society. And this is their goal. So the idea, the shifting from the classical jurisprudence to minority jurisprudence. This did not happen before the issue of immigration to the West. They didn't develop a fiqh or jurisprudence for minorities before the problem of immigrating to the West. There is two scholars, Al-Qaradawi, he is the founder of European Council for Fatwa and Research. He was a global mufti. He was very influential on the Muslim countries. And another scholar also in North America, Al-Alawani, is also very active in North America. Both of them searched in Islamic history and came up with the idea that we have to consider the text with the context, not just the text of Islam, of the Quran, but the context in which Muslims live. And they developed some kind of principles, if you like, to guide them to establish this new fiqh, which they call it minority fiqh. What benefits the Muslims more? Is there a necessity to make what is normally forbidden to be less forbidden, or even can be applied, acceptable, because of necessity and because what makes good to the Muslim, to ease the life of Muslims in the West. So these two scholars, Al-Qaradawi and Alawani, introduced a collective framework of fiqh, considers both religious traditions and the conditions of living as minorities. They argue, that is their argument, that Sharia itself is being developed or given from the lawgiver God to make the life of Muslims easier, not to complicate their life. So why we don't do something good to help Muslims? They adopted a methodology grounded in manfa'a and maslaha, benefits and interests of Muslims, as well as addressing human needs, necessities, darurat, by permitting action that are ordinarily prohibited in situation involving a moral conflict between two um, choices, the lesser in evil or the lesser of the two evils should be chosen. It is a very interesting principle. We'll see it. So now I'm going to my findings because they developed this kind of jurisprudence for minorities, but not all people, all Muslims in Europe, whether scholars or ordinary Muslims, um, they are not convinced that this is something good to be applied. So in my research, I found that a majority, 64.8%, favored the view that Sharia should be interpreted differently for Muslims in Europe. They adopting fiqh al-aqaliyyat. Those aware of a new fiqh, but who believed the position they had adopted in their countries of origin should not change in Europe. They want to continue as they live in a Muslim majority countries, their countries of origin, the same in Europe. Actually, Tariq Ramadan was a professor in Oxford. He was of this group. He said there is no need. I remember you mentioned that you wanted him to be one of my supervisors, but I know why you refused. Because he doesn't believe that Muslims in Europe, in a minority, need a special thing. He actually, I quoted him, he said, the problem is not us, the problem is European. Yeah. They don't accept us. So there is no need for adaptation. So this is about 20.40% did not accept this new thing. And 14, to my surprise, this is also 14.8 of Muslims referred to adhere to European laws rather than Sharia in civic life. That was a minority, but for me was a significant minority. That Muslims said, well, okay, as long as we can, there is no hindrance to worship, to pray, to fast. They don't keep us from doing this. We don't need the rules of controlling. I will see it after other areas of life. We are happy with European laws. This was a significant minority in my thesis. Now to also, I would like it to a little bit of analyzing it, or just making subgroups, which is probably what I put in red is something to speak to us. The majority, whether the Shiite or Sunnis, see that the wasati or centrist position of fiqh al-aqaliyyah is good for Muslims. But there is still some who say it's not good among the Shia and among the Sunnis as well. The liberal position was more in the Sunni more than in the Shia. Now, in the words of Al-Qaradawi, who developed the he said that the fiqh al-aqaliyyat centrist position that is between two positions. He said the position that goes back to the history, that's importing from frozen ideas. That's his, I'm putting him. And the other extreme is importing ideas from the West. And he said what they developed was the best between these two extremes. But to my surprise, I found that females, the last one, the last year, 28.6 are more for the liberal position, more than males. 18 males and 28 females. And the second surprise also, the second generation, those who were born in Europe, was expected to be more for Westernized,
Liberal, yeah.
but it is the opposite.
Wow.
Actually, they are more than the first generation, 19.50%, and the second generation, 34.
Wow.
So these still, just to give you a hint, most of the troubles happen in Europe from extremists towards second generation people, not first generation. So this is just a little bit of, I think I did this. I would like it to go to another section of the presentation about Shariah itself. Sharia, as I said, in the view of Muslims, is divine in a sense of being coming from the lawgiver who is Allah, who is God. But its interpretation is done by humans. That's why we have different opinions, different schools of thoughts. That's why there is a room also to develop a new fiqh for minorities. But the divide also, this is image I made myself. Branches of Sharia. In each circle, there is some kind of adaptation happen. Like in the very inner circle, religious practices, there is prayer and fasting and all this. There is also some adaptation happening here. Like Friday prayers in Europe, they don't give time before going to the mosque to perform the group prayers together. So they needed some adaptation to the laws in Europe when to do it. So the adaptation was, okay, you can do it as a prayer, as a midday prayer after work. You see, and also grouping the prayers because they pray 5 times a day. Some of the prayer times are during the working hours, and in Europe they don't allow, the stop of work to do prayer. So there is kind of adaptation happen even in the inner circle, which is religious practice. The going out to the family matters. In all Muslim countries, family issues are still based on Sharia. However, there is also some adaptation or some challenge. It is the least adopted adaptation happen in this in Europe for two reasons. Because it's still forbidden for a Muslim female to marry a non-Muslim male. The opposite is possible. Muslim men can marry European or people, they put it, the people of the book as you were a Christian, but the opposite is forbidden. And it's an issue because it's against the European laws, which give freedom of choice. You are free to choose your partner. You don't have authority as a parents or family to forbid your daughter from marrying one of their choice. So it's a challenge, and it's still a challenge for Europeans and for Muslims as minority. The second big challenge is in the area of inheritance. Islam does not give equal inheritance to male and female. But the issue goes beyond this. It is forbidden by Islamic law that a converted Muslim to another faith inherit from his parents, which is also against the European Code of Laws. And a non-Muslim partner, let's say that a Muslim man married a non-Muslim or a Christian wife. Actually, she has no right of inheritance from her husband. And this is a problem, it's still a problem. In my thesis, I mentioned in my conclusion, that's something that scholars needs to work in it. But it is a challenge. It goes to the third one, and this is the one that probably our focus today is the economic laws. That is to cover dietary practices, to cover also taking loans from non-Islamic banks to for businesses or for houses, mortgage and all this. We are not going to speak about this today, but we will move, as we move outside, like the last circle, the civic regulation and penal laws. The penal laws are forbidden in Europe, even they don't cut the hand of the thief. It's so they have to accept to move from religious laws into the secular laws. It's like being imposed on them. And that is not just in Europe, but also in Muslim countries and so on. I'm not going to go in detail on this, but let us just move to the concerning dietary practice. As I said in the beginning, dietary rules extend from what to eat or drink. That is just confusing. I think that's only what you eat or drink. It's slaughtering of animals and birds, the way to slaughter them, to beauty products. You'll be surprised also to there's a dispute whether the beauty products are all acceptable, could be used for Muslims or not. Sweets, toothpaste, the use of recycled water, as I said, to medicine. Some of the medicine they use gelatin from pork. Is it allowed or not allowed? And clothes, as I said. So let's talk about some examples. So that I have here slaughtering of animals. The slaughtering of animals. The EU regulation on killing animals and birds is different from Islamic law, from Jewish law as well, to be fair. The EU aims to minimize the pain and suffering for the animals before slaughtering. They don't slaughter. The Islamic way is to do how to cut the neck of the animal and to be sure that all the blood came out of the body, and then it is halal. They recite also some verses from the Quran while slaughter. Now, that is forbidden right now in Europe to do this. They would like it to give somehow the animals to make the animal sleep and then cut the neck or do whatever afterward. So what does Muslims do now? They said, well, in Islamic way of slaughtering animals, there is a kind of also to make the suffering less by choosing where to cut the neck. You see, the like a camel, they cut here, the animal, they cut up. It chooses a spot where it makes, a fast death, if you like. So the use is as, okay, we can accept the Western regulation in a sense that this is also possible. So this is adaptation they did for slaughtering and killing animals and birds. Move to another area, transformation of prohibited substances. This is a very huge area of adaptation. This is an ongoing debate about whether beauty products, sweets, toothpaste, medicine must be made only from animals permitted in Islam, or if we use substances taken out of some other animal. Is it possible or not possible? To my surprise, also in my thesis, I have a man that I interviewed. He did same goal. He's actually shocked. His debate was whether to include crosses and exchange of gold. Is it allowed since Islam does not believe that Jesus died on the cross or not? So he needs a fatwa or some legal advice, if you like, to do it or not. So here is now the adaptation happens like the fiqh al-aqaliyya, what is matter is not the original substance that being used to produce the toothpaste or the sweets, whether it's taken from animals like pork, uh, what is matter is the end product, the new product. Does it look like pork, sweets? No. They said, okay, what is matter for us is the end product of the substance, not what is made from. That is a creative way of looking at this issue. It is not an easy issue, but it is at least they look for some creative ideas. It's still some people, and I see them often when I do shopping, like buying sweets for children. I hear sometimes parents to forbid the children from buying sweets from shop that is not halal. Even so, according to the minority jurisprudence, the matter is not what is made from, the matter is what is the product in some sweets. But this is kind of adaptation. Cookery schools. This also was an interesting subject for me to find out that to study to have a diploma in order to work in a restaurant in Europe, you need to have a diploma. There is no Islamic school on teaching how to deal in halal food or they need a diploma. And in the process of obtaining a diploma, they are obliged to taste the food they prepare or the alcohols they prepare. So they are obliged to test to find out is it okay, is it somewhat salt or not. So again, they needed a fatwa whether to do this or not. I have a copy of a fatwa on my thesis that said yes, because it is important necessity and what benefit the Muslims can justify doing the forbidden. So they allow them to test the food, but not to swallow it. And spit it out. This was very interesting way, but it's a creative way to deal with a problem. We say, to find a solution, if you like. And many of them, I interviewed, I think 6 students, second generation, and they just, it was very interesting to talk to them about this issue. However, one of the questions I asked them, will you work in a condition like this, preparing food and tested and spit it out? And most of them say, we prefer not to. But if we are obliged, we will. We will continue like this. I think that is one of the issues that you see the majority of people, Muslims, especially second generation, work in businesses, self-employed businesses, and halal food restaurants, snacks, and all this. To avoid this problem, they did what they can do to establish or to run their own businesses. A majority of people who work in this second generation people, I think that they see them even here in England. You see many Muslims have shop that they call halal food or halal sandwiches or this kind of things to avoid. But to obtain a diploma to be able to work in a restaurant, you have to follow the teaching. Let's move to this also. To employment, eating pork or drinking alcohol is forbidden in Islam. You are not allowed to. But you'll be surprised also. The issue is not just eating, dealing in it, handling it, working in a supermarket to sell alcohol or to process meat. Not slaughtered according to Muslim law. Is it allowed or forbidden? Working in McDonald's, for example, is it allowed or forbidden? And they needed somehow kind of fatwas or advice, legal advice to help them. So the advice is like this. If you establish your own businesses, like having your own restaurant or shop, you are not allowed uh, to deal in forbidden substances. There is no help to you. You are not allowed to do it. But if you work in a mainstream job, like you work in a supermarket, in McDonald's or a restaurant, where you are not the owner of the restaurant, you can deal with forbidden substances until you find something that is not forbidden for Muslims. So this is the kind of creativity they do. Those who work in mainstream jobs involving the prohibited substance were a significant minority. 14% of Muslims work in shops like McDonald's or restaurants where they offer all kinds of food and drinks. They were conscious about both their religious identity and necessary adjustment due to the demands of wider society. The ECR, the European Council for Fatwa and Research, advice for those who work in such mainstream jobs is, here's the fatwa, quote, you may continue to work if you don't have another sufficient source of income for your family, support your family. You must, in any case, remain in pursuit of another job which doesn't involve dealing in any haram or forbidden matter. So they allow them to work in shops or supermarkets or restaurants, dealing with alcohol and processing meat from different animals, no problem, as long as it is a necessity to support your family, you can do it. At the same time, try to find another alternative. This is not the end of the story, actually. In my research, I found that many Muslims, even working in restaurants, they choose to go against their convictions. People who work in a restaurant, they found that if they don't offer alcohol for customers, especially people coming from Western background, they lose some businesses. So they added to the menu. And I interviewed 2 or 3 of them, and I said, we know, but we if we don't deal in alcohol, we will lose some customers. So some people choose to go against the regulation, and this is one of the advices in my conclusion. I said, you should, the Muslim leaders, because a Muslim need advice from a legal source to help him to deal with this thing. You cannot make your own decision, if you like. So I said, please help this group of people. Otherwise, they go against their religious conviction. So just to conclude now, and maybe having some question. In conclusion, the presence of Muslim and non-Islamic majority lands present a complex and evolving dynamics that challenges traditional jurisdictional boundaries. The development of minority fiqh jurisprudence has provided Muslim communities with a valuable framework for both spiritual fulfillment and active civic engagement. This shift towards more adaptive and um, context-sensitive interpretations had enabled Muslim minorities to harmonize their religious and obligation with their rules as active participants in pluralistic society. Still more work to do from Muslim side, but at least they try to find some solutions for the challenges Muslim face on that.
Thank you. I really hope that what Ishak has presented to us today gives you some idea of what his thesis contains and hopefully encourages you to pick up his thesis if you are here in residence. Even if you are not, you should be able to access his thesis But as he's already informed us, he's in the process of getting his manuscript ready for publication by a university in Belgium. So that should be published very soon, I think within 6 months' time from now.
Thesis itself is available on the.
Thesis is available. Yeah. So there is no embargo on the thesis. If you're interested, you can download the thesis. I wanted to ask you about self-regulation versus a central authority that regulates behavior. How is behavior regulated? Is it done largely by individuals themselves, or is there a central authority that keeps an eye on who is behaving, who's not, and what are some of the consequences of not following the advice that the centrist position offers to Muslims in Europe?
No. A Muslim has no freedom to choose. I always say they are surrounded by the family. That's number one circle. They cannot choose without the family. It is not individualistic society like in the West. It is a kind of structure, family, the parents, grandparents, and extended families. You will be also supervised. They have right even to inherit from the parents. So this is the first circle. The second circle is religious leaders. A Muslim cannot decide. You are free to interpret the text, the biblical text for yourself, but a Muslim cannot. They have always to go to a religious leader to interpret it to you. So this is the second circle. That's including the imams, the leaders, or muftis, and all these kind of leaders. Each one has a part to decide for Muslim. The other circle, the third circle, is society. Society is controlled by shame, so you cannot just do what you want if the society does not approve it. Just a little hint, that's why Muslim evangelism is difficult, because you have to take the Muslim from all these circles to help him to get out of all this. But a Muslim individual is not free to decide for himself or herself. The consequences, if you disobey, that goes to the lawgiver. You do something against the lawgiver, and then probably you will be punished. So you have to submit to the regulations of the professionals, if you like. I'm not saying that they are not active players. Some choose to go against, like liberals. Some individuals also choose to go against the convictions. I am in touch with many Muslim ladies, married non-Muslim. They're happy having children, but they are aware of what they are doing, but they just, for some practical reasons, they do it anyhow. But in general, a Muslim is not free to choose for himself or herself without all this kind of circles.
Thank you. Marina, then you.
Yes. Thank you very much for your presentation. I really enjoyed it, especially learning about all the small practicalities in life. I've never actually thought about the beauty through dark and all. And it reminds me, I've seen one shop where they say it's halal stuff, and I'm saying that this is not something that you eat. But now I understand. I was finding it really strange, but then now I can understand, where it all comes from. Of course, it was not really reflecting why it was at that point. I just had a good laugh, but now I understand that I was ignorant. So I have two questions. You were talking about, the liberal group. I'm not very good in this subject and the topic, so I may be using terms that are not really terms that we use. The more liberal one who would rather emerge in the context they are in, the minority who has become minority in the European context and are willing to adjust and adapt to the context. So I was wondering about the relationship they would have with the others, the more conservative one. Okay, it is well and good. Now they are emerged, adapting well with their neighbors, the majority European, but is the relationship between them, the more liberal one and the more conservative one, strained? So what would be your opinion in this? What would be the lesser evil? And where does the moral conflict fit into that? And my second question is the percentage. I was quite interested, and like the percentage that you were showing, but I'm not very good with all those percentage again. The only thing that I could understand was I was just able to understand a little bit of the first slide, then I couldn't go to the second one. So just the first column, the liberal.
You can review that.
So I'm going to talk just about the first column. The others I have not understood yet. So in the first column, it was quite surprising to see that, the second generation are lesser in percentage. So I have an idea, I can assume why, but I would like you to explain a little bit more why.
Yeah.
And also, okay, the male and female, okay, coming quite high in the liberal is not a surprise because of the women's position and situation in Islamic communities. So, but I would just like you to explain a little bit about those.
Yeah, liberals first they are not accepted as such by Muslims, even by the people who are in the center and the centrist. Like Al-Qaradawi called them people who import from the West. So they are not, the Muslims don't consider them as being good Muslims. Now the conservative look at the two groups. That is one thing. So they said the Salafi or the people who look for the history, they say Islam is Islam. We have to do it like this thing. Now to come to the second question about women, you already came with the conclusion that females are more, they're looking for freedom. They want to be out of this system who consider them as a second class, if you like. They favor males more than females. But the second generation, probably because they don't find their place in society, in Western society. They don't fit as the first generation in the Islamic context, and then they don't fit 100% in the European context. So they are kind of having what we can call it identity crisis. They don't know where to belong. I have published a paper about issues of second and third generations, and this is one of the identity crisis. They still receive a package from the family that we are Muslims, that is what we should do, and that's what we shouldn't do. That is a package that's been transmitted from generation to generation. But then they are not passive recipients. They live in the West. They see democracy. They see the school system. They see all these kind of social advantages in the West. So they are they have a crisis where to fit. They receive a package. They still have the sense we are better than the West. But then they see the West, especially when they go to vacation to their home countries, and they see how life is there, and to compare if you like, the idealism they receive from the family about Muslim societies and the reality they see there, so they are more confused. So I think that is why they want to look for identity. So they probably find their identity more in religious activities. That is why there's a thesis been done here in Oxford about the identity crisis of the second generation and how they can, especially the second generation, they can live with multi-identities. That is the thesis. We just encourage them to be British and to be Asian or the Pakistani and Muslims, European, but still we didn't reach yet a final position where we say, well, it got settled. The second generation is not so. They are the source of trouble in Europe, as I said. All the crisis that happen in North America and to Europe is done by second generations. They look for a place on society. So they have this identity crisis. And that is why I think it is more to find their identity and religion, just to be different than the European or the Western.
Thank
You
you.
okay?
Thank you, Ishak, for this interesting lecture. And I have two questions, and my first one is very similar to David's question. So it seems that the Muslims in Belgium and also in the European area, they are facing a lot of challenges in their daily interactions, in their daily lives. So the issues are emerging from the ground when they interact with the people in their own workplaces and different places and social settings. So it is like a bottom-up approach. Problems are happening on the ground, and it is reported to the authority, and the authority reinterpret and producing some kind of creative adaptation for people who are living on the ground as well. So implication is being done through the top-down approach again. So my question is this, you said that there are religious leaders or professional people who are interpreting these issues. Who are they? Do you have a overarching unified authority, or it can be done individually within their own small Muslim community? That is my first question. And second question is, knowing that this kind of creative adaptations are taking place within Muslim communities, I wonder whether the church's visional approach has been changed or remained the same to evangelize Muslim people in Belgium. So questions.
Okay, one question related to the lecture, the other one is after.
Yeah.
But we're talking about the central authority of Islam. Islam doesn't have a head of authority, like at the top of the castle.
Yes.
But however, they have institutions like the European Council of Fatwa and Research here in the UK is giving fatwas to all Muslims in Europe. So it's a kind of a central authority. Not all the leaders are members in the European Council of Fatwa and Research. There's still some independent imams and muftis. They still do their own fatwas, legal fatwas. This is so. It's the same in North America. They have also a council for North America, similar to the one we have in Europe, to give advice. And this advice is just they publish it, they put it in the website, the internet, that people can search and look for it. They allow also local Muslims to use it as well as a guideline for their advice from Muslims. A Muslim often go to the professionals to get the advice. They cannot do it from themselves. It's a very good. The problem also, most of these legal advisors, if you like, they've been trained in their home countries. They are not very much aware of the European context, and this is problematic. They don't have the schools to train imams in the UK, for example. They still go to university, they study, but they at the end go to the Islamic Center to get their degrees. So there's a kind of lack of imams being trained on both the European or Western context and Muslim context. So this is one part of the problem. Even those who work in the European Council for Fatwa and Research, mostly leaders from Muslim countries, Muslim majority countries, like Qaradawi and so on. So this is problematic for them. They still struggle also in areas like family issues or helping people working in restaurants to allow them to offer to include alcohol in their menu or other kind of food. They still don't come to a compromise solution.
Mhm.
But I think in my thesis also, I was asked to add this issue about imams, the role of imam in society, especially those who are not trained in Western countries. It is problematic for the community.
Thank you. Bishop,
The second question, is, I always say, I wrote a paper actually about the Muslim evangelism for Muslim diasporas, 2 papers. They are available on the internet. But you have to look also, as a Christian, we have to look for creative ways of reaching out for Muslims. I always start with this proposal: a Muslim has a right to hear the gospel in a context that doesn't conflict with his culture and his expectation. Let me explain clearly. I use our example in reaching out for Muslims. We have established in our church what we call 3 different rooms of evangelism. The first room is to welcome Muslims, help them unconditionally. You come, we offer food packages for refugees. We have collection of clothes and furniture if they like. You come, you take, no conditions. You don't have to listen to a message. We welcome them 5 minutes, telling them, that, for example, that Jesus said, it is not by bread alone that man lives, but we don't force the gospel on them, on the system. The reason for this is we would like them to watch the gospel in dynamic terms, to experience the love, the compassion, the help we offer, the smile we get. Now, this is the first one. When we do it weekly with other churches distributing packages enough we receive from the government, we offer for refugees and people in need a package each week that's enough for them. Besides, we give clothes and furniture. We help the second generation homework, school, and all this. This is one room. The second room is for those who would like to go a little bit more to know about Christian. Now, if somebody from the first group come and say, well, do you do something else? So, well, if you'd like to join a discovery group, come. But this is a totally separate group. This is the second. We do we don't criticize Islam at this stage. We don't criticize the Prophet. We offer Jesus ideas on Jesus with the grace of the Lord without criticizing Islam. We don't say, for example, that Jesus did this and Muhammad did this. You have to choose between the two. It doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. Our goal in the second room is to win a friend more than winning a dialogue. I can easily defeat them. I can prove to them that Islam is not the same like Christianity and all this, but I lose a friend. My goal in the second room is to keep friendship until they come to the third room, when they are ready to accept the Lord. I think this is, we found, at least in our example, it's a very good framework of Macedonia. Be sure that they have this experience of dynamic encounter with the gospel, not in a dogma, but in a practical thing, love, compassion, smiles, and all this. Don't be fast on presenting the gospel. Give a fair opportunity to the Holy Spirit to work, and then you move step by step. And I think this is just
Very good.
We have plenty of time for questions, so is it okay if I take one question from the room and then ask Douglas to ask his question? We're going to call. So,
Yeah. Sorry, you
So-
say
yeah,
Appleton.
first, Douglas and then.
Sorry.
No, sorry, Paul,
No.
wasn't very clear.
No, thank you for this presentation. Mine is a gender question, and looking at the proposition of the woman I still think that because of the circles that they're surrounded by, as you explained, they might have a liberal position, but they still have these circles around them. So there's some sort of limitations still with what they can do with their liberal positions. But I still want to ask, you talked about the possibility that a male Muslim could marry a non-Muslim woman, but a female Muslim can never marry a non-Muslim man. But just for argument's sake, if this female Muslim was really adamant they wanted to marry this non-Muslim man, and they probably elope, and they still go ahead and marry this person, then what comes after that? Are they disowned? Do they no longer belong? Do they have to denounce being Muslim? And attached to that, if a male Muslim marries a woman that is not a Muslim, does the woman have to then convert from whatever religion they had, or if they were non-religious, they then have to become Muslim? Or how does that work in the European context?
Just a clarification, a Muslim man can marry a Christian or a Jew.
Oh,
What they call it, a woman from the people of the book.
okay.
But he cannot go outside of this
Okay.
unless a woman converted to Islam. That is a condition. But marrying a Jew or a Christian doesn't oblige the wife to be converted to Islam. But it's obliged the husband to be sure that the children grow as Muslims, grow up as Muslims. It is, also to go with this, you will be surprised at the, like in Muslim countries, a woman has no right to divorce. A man has a right to divorce.
Yeah.
A woman, if she doesn't like it to continue in a marriage life, she has to go to court. She cannot simply say, well, you are divorced, like a man has a right to say this. They cannot simply say, I divorce you, like a man. You will be surprised that in Europe, women ask for divorce. They just enjoy the freedom. And even I dealt with many cases when they just come out as like refugees coming out of Hamas, they're still Muslims. But a woman asked for divorce because of what happened to her in her homeland, and they just enjoy the freedom given to them. So it's a new context for Muslims to live and to enjoy this kind of freedom. Sometimes they, I may say, that misuse it, asking for divorce. But at the same time, they also enjoy the individual life, especially the ladies I interviewed. They decided to go against their conviction and married non-Muslims, Muslim second generation. They go much well. We are free. And there was a case here in the UK about a Muslim woman wanted to marry a Christian man who gave a written commitment that he will let his children grow up as Muslims, and he will never forbid his wife to continue as a Muslim or to be converted to Christianity. It was in the newspaper. I have a copy of not here, but the European Council for Fatwa and Research forbids it. It is forbidden. You cannot do this, even with a commitment to allow the children to be Muslims and so on. It is problematic for, but it doesn't mean that all Muslim women accept this. Many of them go against their conviction and marry non-Muslims. I know many in my community, Muslim women married to non-Muslim. Yeah.
Yeah, just a question on that, because I do know some Muslim women married to non-Muslim man. So and then the family, the two family on both sides are getting along quite well. So I'm wondering what case would that be then? Because in realities, we found people like that, families who are quite happy and getting along. Maybe the legalities and the religious rituals are not done, but they do get along. So I'm wondering, Then how did they get married? Is it court marriage? Is that?
It's a very minority that they can behave like this. They can go against family. In my experience, the first 2-3 years of marriage are not accepted by the family.
Okay.
They start the relaxing relationship a little bit when the children come. This is my experience. It has nothing to do with the religious laws or. But the first reaction was no. If you decided to marry a non-Muslim, no. And even sometimes goes beyond no to kill the woman. It happened here in the UK, it happened in Belgium. There was a man threw his daughter from the building and he was right. And one here killed in the tube in the middle by the family. So, but if the family are liberal, for example, our religion is for them doesn't go beyond the practicing 5 times prayer and Ramadan and all this, and they are happy to live with us as liberal. They may accept the marriage, but the factor of shame from society controls them, at least in the beginning, until the relationship.
I just mentioned that. Just one statement, because I just mentioned this, maybe not in Brussels, but just last month there was a wedding. The man is a Muslim, the family is a Muslim, the wife's, the girl's side, they're Christians, and they had a church wedding. So that's why, just an example.
Some Christian roots somehow.
Exactly.
Okay, so Douglas first and then Paul. Douglas?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Ishak Atas, for your very informative research and sharing it with us. So for my clarification and understanding, the table that is shown, the majority of the people are in favor of minority take, if I am understanding it correctly. Yeah. So is it based on your interviews, or is it also representative of the thinking or the practices in the overall society that you have in Belgium or Brussels?
How representative is that?
Yeah, this is coming from interviews. Belgium could be considered as a case study, but it is totally different than most of European countries. So the data I have is based on interviews. I interviewed 108 people, women and men from different generations and also from different branches of Islam. This is the data I drew out of my thesis, my interviews and group discussions as well.
So, and how many Muslims are living in that area from where you did these interviews? I mean, total population of Muslims in that area. Like you mentioned, you did 100 interviews. So what's the total population of Muslims in that area, if you know about it?
Belgium is 10 million people. The official statistics is very difficult because in Europe and the West in general, they don't make statistics based on religious or ethnic orientation. So all my resources, taken from Muslim institutions, and Muslims say that they are 10% of the population in Belgium. So 1 million Muslims. If you are talking about Europe in general, we have about between 25 and 30 million Muslims from plus 400,000 million. So it is a minority, but it is significant minority.
All right, thank you very much. That answers my question. Thank you.
Yes, it's wonderful to see you again. It really is, and I'm very sorry I couldn't be here at the start of your seminar. My question is a little bit different. I'm really intrigued by the kind of hermeneutical method that the Muslim scholars use to
adapt to their minority position. And, we're aware of this conversation going on and work being done. And I wondered, I know this is not the focus of your research, but it really made me wonder whether you saw any similarities between the kind of hermeneutical approaches being used by Muslim scholars and the kind of hermeneutical approaches that Christian scholars use when they're thinking about contextualization and how the gospel adapts to different contexts. Did you see any kind of similarities, connections between those approaches?
I think I may go beyond this.
Right.
I go to the life of Jesus himself and the early church. Do they use any contextualized methods to communicate the gospel? I always see that in the life of Jesus and the early church, the message was the same. Jesus is Savior. You have to accept him to be saved. But how to communicate this has to be changed. The recipient should inspire us in the methodology of communication. If you call this contextualization, or if you call it adaptation, you can call it, but it's a must, especially when you reach out for groups, ethnic groups. It has to be the methodology of communication, especially the area of communication, has to be changed. Talking about Muslim, when I communicate the gospel with Muslims, I cannot simply use a formula that we are sinners, God is love, and because of his love, he gave Jesus to us. It doesn't make much sense to Muslims to use this formula. We have to communicate the message, no compromise on the message, but the adaptation should happen in the methodology of communication. I should be aware when I say something to a Muslim that this kind of noise in the process of communication. And this noise will probably affect my methodology of my communication. So I have to be aware of this noise and to try to avoid the misunderstanding from Muslims. That is important in Muslim evangelism. The methodology, you can call it contextualization, you can call it adoption, you can call it cultural, the clash between culture and the Bible. But the roots is not because of today. It goes to as early as to the minister of Jesus and the minister of the early church. That should inspire us as Christians to be creative in methodology.
Yeah, let me refine my question a little bit better, because I'm not talking about conversion and communication of the gospel across cultures. Because your work is looking at Muslims working within their own Muslim culture. How do we as Muslims stay true to being Muslims? The equivalent would be Christians thinking about how they remain true Christians whilst also being true, citizens of their country, etc., etc. So it's not about conversion. I'm not talking about communicating the gospel in that sense. And obviously, this is particularly to do with the adaptation of law. Now you go back to Jesus. Jesus takes the Mosaic, the interpretation of the Mosaic, and he does something, again and again about that. I don't know. I'm just wondering whether there were similarities that you saw at that level, because certainly when Jesus deals with the law, it seems like he is trying to get behind the law to the purpose of the law, and that's what it felt like with what the illustrations that you used, that the Muslim scholars, the muftis, were constantly saying, what's the purpose of this law? Not just what is the law and how do we apply it. And that to me is very interesting, because Islam, in many contexts, comes over and we lived for 12 years in Tunisia. The law is the law. Doesn't matter what the purpose is. You obey it because it's the law. Whereas these guys, in their minority context, are being forced to say, what does this actually mean? Why is it like?
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm just.
Yeah, okay, talking about hermeneutics, there is some thesis done by an Oxford Center for Christian Islamic Studies.
Yeah.
About the hermeneutical tools of interpretation of the 5 books of Moses.
Right.
I have a copy of the first book. They are also trying to adopt different framework of hermeneutics to speak to Muslims. And I think there is just not much done in this area as Christians. We still, very conservative, if you like, or going back always to the Christian. The reason I mention evangelism, because the area of missions is an area where they do a lot of contextualization in it. There are many books now in missions how to be creative in missions. But in the area of hermeneutics, we hope somebody will probably develop a thesis how to develop the framework of hermeneutics that can speak to Muslims or but it is a must. I have done my some researches and influence of Christianity and the 5 books of Moses on Islam and on civilization, but it's not in the area of hermeneutics. It's just how they influence each other. But it is an area that it is lacking of reception. Hermeneutics.
Well, we have Matt online. Maybe Matt has. Maybe in your work you found something.
Yeah, that's a great question. And in my own study, I was reading a book by Kamali, Principles of Islamic Jurisprudence. And as I was reading this book, it tells how they basically put Shariah together. And I have to say that I really struggled reading this on a personal level because it's actually, as law goes, it's put together very, very well. And so I was always debating in myself, why don't we apply this kind of into Christianity? And I literally, one time I slapped myself. I just went and just smacked myself crazy and said, because Christianity is not about law. And it's not. While Muslims believe that they don't have the same concepts of salvation that we do, but bottom line is the religion's about maintaining law and doing a perfect job, and in that it'll be weighed out at the end, and you will be not forgiven, but allowed access, I guess, into the garden, as it were. But in Christianity, it's about grace, and that runs contrary to law. And we have to be very careful in Christianity, because I think that there is a tendency to go in the law direction, even as Christians, because it's easier. It's easier than living in grace. That's what I wanted to say about that.
Thank you. I quite enjoyed this little discussion. Emily propose very good question. Yeah. Anyone else who has? Yeah.
I have just quick. The liberal position, you mentioned like the 5 prayers in Ramadan. So they, even as liberals, they still would be serious about practicing those. And you said they would be viewed as bad Muslims by the other 2 groups. Are they allowed to go to the mosque to do these practices?
You have to practice in order to, if you would like it to achieve not salvation, because the word salvation is not what they call it, to achieve victory.
Oh, okay.
Which is a future promise to go to paradise.
Right.
So you have to pray, because this is how you make your credit.
How you get points to get in, right?
So the prayers and fasting and all this, it doesn't. You don't need to do this to be a Muslim. but you need to do it to be a practicing Muslims, and it's for your privilege. Going to mosque to pray is okay for liberals. The conflict is other areas, like when they go beyond the acts of worship and go to the other circles of Sharia, and they make more adaptation with the secular laws.
Would you Okay, so I think your lecture reminds me of one Islamic scholar called Fethullah Gulen. I want to knowledge around Turkish. And I think he has been working so hard to contextualize the Sharia law in many different areas of law. And one of them is the economic law. And he says, the Sharia law says that we shouldn't take any usury or interest when we lend money. But is it really God's will or Allah's will? Maybe Allah's will is to maximize our profit by taking usury and then donate the money to God's mission, to mosques. So, I mean, this kind of creative adaptation is happening not only within the European countries, but also within Islamic countries too. So I wonder what is the root cause of this kind of creative adaptation? Is it because of the influence of secularization and pragmatism, or is it for liberating, emancipating people and to enhance their faith? So which one is the true motivation?
I think the true motivation is a challenge coming from secular laws.
Okay.
You cannot live in Europe without accepting the regulation of European code. So they have to kind of not compromise, but they have to find a way to live in peace with religious laws, which they are obliged to live with, and also the European laws, which they are obliged to submit to as a condition of citizenship. So this is a creative idea, is how to find a middle way to be okay, not as in odds with any of this.
So this kind of contextualization is happening within Islamic countries as well. So they are not pressed by any kind of civil laws, but they are doing it anyway. So is it because
that is what I said, this certainly, as you go out to a regulation, there's not a single country that applies what they call the limits imposed by God, which is stoning or slash the adultery, or stoning the woman adulteress, or cutting the hand of a thief. Nobody except even Saudi Arabia now they are going away from it. Afghanistan, Iran are the only two countries. Sudan tried, but they stopped. So the slavery, for example, is allowed in Islam, but because of the Western code that forbid it, they are obliged to give away some of the Sharia laws. So the more we go out, even in Islamic countries, as you said, they don't live and they keep the limits imposed by Sharia, by Allah.
Just a small question, a very small one. The community that call themselves non-practicing Muslim, are they totally out of the study? They are in the liberal, the non-practicing Muslim, they call themselves non-practicing Muslim.
A Muslim doesn't need to be practiced. You can still be a Muslim and never go to the mosque.
Okay, so they're the liberal in your category.
Even Salafi, they have some other reason not to go to the mosque for, they separate themselves from society. They don't want to be mixed, right? But you go to the mosque to achieve a victory and the day of judgment, because salvation in Islam is a promise in the future. I wrote a thesis about this. There are two areas. Spirituality in Islam is lacking, and also salvation for the problems of here and now. Why sickness? Why people suffering? Islam doesn't offer this kind of solution. That's why they go to folk Islam. They visit an imam or go to a tomb or whatever a saint to find a solution. And the spirituality, the lack of a spirituality, also led to the development of Sufism in Islam, the Sufi Muslim. So I wrote a thesis and I signaled out these two things. And now talking about also grace. Do we have grace in Islam? Yes. What grace in the law that the lawgiver, God, Allah, doesn't count the bad deeds the same way he counts the good deeds. He multiplies the good deeds by 10. Like if you do something good, he makes it 10 times. That is God's grace. And the bad deeds, he don't bad deeds. So that is, it is a huge subject, salvation. And as I said, I published one paper about the sin, the concepts of sin in Islam. So you can have access to it.
Oh, I think our time is up. So when I was organizing these lectures, one of the things I promised the publisher was that I'll point the audience to published versions of the paper, even though these are lectures which are being recorded and they are likely to be uploaded on our YouTube channel. We are encouraged to include the link to where the original papers are published and can be found. So they can be found in the Brill website. So if you look for the International Journal for Ancient Christianity, I think it was volume 5, issue number 2, details. So if you're interested in all of those 7 papers that were published as part of this theme on meekness and faith as polity, find them there. So we had 4 presentations. We have one more lecture to go, which is going to be by Michael Nazir Ali. Potentially, there is space for one more by Matt, who's joined us. His paper also was published in the same journal issue. But do come for that lecture. It's going to be very interesting. It was actually put together by Michael and Amir, who recently defended his thesis. You probably know Amir, Samuel Amir, who's from Iran. It was jointly written, but Michael heavily edited for obvious reasons and made some very original contributions to the paper before it was published. And so both of them decided that it was appropriate for Michael to present it. So do come for that lecture as well. It's going to be on the 15th of July. But thank you very much, Ishak. I'm really proud of the fact that we have a graduate like you who is not just productive with the knowledge you're generating, but you're also making an impact in Belgian society. And all the best wishes for what you are planning to do in the future. It's a pity I didn't know he was coming there in person, because I would have taken him out for lunch.
Thank you.
And eaten with him?
Probably not, because
So the Belgian Muslims view the fatwa situation as somewhat harsh, or how do they view it in general?
does he know what
They say the wasati, or the creative interpretation of the
illustration
is like me,
Okay.
because it helps society to working in a mainstream job. So
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
how long.
And I mean, I know like the Iranian situation where the government's been so repressive, that's resulted in a big revival for Christianity there, but in some of the European contexts, you haven't seen as much of a revival of Christianity because they've tried to be more understanding about the context and helping Muslims to adapt.
I think,
Farmers, they are free.
Right.
Because read that the Iranians
They cannot really see such.
I mean, the big Muslim that in Belgium is Iranian. Which is started it.
Oh, okay, okay.
The Islam and the law. So bye bye.
Thank you for joining. Time is continue.